America knows that Joe Biden wants this crisis. My big concern are just the number of people crossing the border with infectious diseases. We know that millions of people have crossed the border, will cross the border this year. 20% of them are positive for COVID. Twice that many have been exposed to it as well. A third of the people that we're releasing into America are refusing the vaccine. As a senior medical student, I spent 2 months on a medical Christian mission in Haiti. And certainly I was concerned about the largest endemic tuberculosis population in the Western Hemisphere, the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. But every morning I got to the clinic, there were 60 to 80 people lined up to see us. And as we saw each one, they would describe the worms that they were seeing, the worms in their feces, the worms in their mouth. Infectious diseases are rampant in these populations. Certainly I continue to feel for the people of Haiti, continue to do mission work through other folks there. I also did mission work in Central America. Again, infectious diseases are rampant. And I can't help but stop and just think about the Afghanistan refugees coming across as well. The highest rate of tuberculosis in that part of the world as well. The only countries in the world still with polio, Afghanistan and Pakistan. I want to do everything we can to show compassion, but at the same time, I was sent here to protect our families from these infectious diseases. America knows that we have a humanitarian crisis on the border, and America knows Joe Biden could fix it. Thank you.
Senator Young. President Biden, Vice President Harris, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the United States Senate and House of Representatives, secure the border, enforce the laws of the land, keep the American people safe and secure during a global pandemic and during a heightened risk of terrorism, do the right thing, show some leadership. Now, the President of the United States campaigned as a steady hand, someone blessed with competence, the most qualified person in the United States of America to be President of the United States. And yet we have this situation. We have this situation where we have open borders, where there's an international perception, accurate, that one can fly to our southern border and walk right on in. There's also a growing perception that Democrats in Congress, as so many have advocated, just might slip an amnesty provision into a partisan reconciliation bill. Listen, it's time for leadership. I will be fighting, my colleagues will be fighting hammer and tong against this complete abdication of leadership moving forward. I visited the border in May, and I was just struck by the human dimension to all of this. Young children filing out of cars, escorted by coyotes, walking a couple of hundred meters from Mexico into gaps in the border wall where they were humanely apprehended by our brave Border Patrol agents. And others, of course, are not discovered, and they just blend into our society. But ultimately, so many of these individuals end up trafficking drugs, trafficking persons, trafficking young children, and that impacts the life of all Americans, certainly impacts the lives of Hoosiers. I have not seen the situation on the border this dire since I served along our southern border as a United States Marine in the mid-1990s. And I have to say, the situation has grown so alarming, so bad, that we even have a number of prominent Democrats who are starting to make their voices heard. Of course, the mayor of Del Rio, Texas, recently spoke out, and he asked President Biden to lead, to get control of this situation, to do his job as our commander-in-chief, as our chief executive. So I say once again, I plead with the president, with our vice president, with my Democratic colleagues here in the Senate and the House of Representatives to stop the insanity.
Senator Capito.
Thank you. I want to thank Senator Cruz for pulling us all together. You can see there's a lot of interest because this does impact every single state in the union. No state is not a border state. So I have a little bit of different perspective and statistics as I look at this issue. I agree with everything that's been said. But I am the ranking member on the Appropriations for Homeland Security. So we always hear that setting your budget, setting your spending priorities, shows your priorities as a nation, shows what you believe in and what you think is important. As we look at the Homeland Security bill as it's coming forward in an appropriation for this single year, number one, no wall funding. And I had heard the statistics that contractors are being paid $5 million a day to not build the wall. We've heard the stories of fences down and gates down and all of that where people are just walking through. But there is no increase, along with the defense budget, no increase in the Department of Homeland Security and in the DOD budget. So what does this tell you? This tells you that it's not a priority, that it's not a priority for this administration to get more agents, to get more wall, more defensive mechanisms to protect our border. And that, to me, shows that what we learned during the campaign and what we've seen as I've talked to Mayorkas and also to Ortiz, who's head of the Border Patrol, is that they didn't have a plan. And I'll take Ortiz out of that conversation and just say the administration, they didn't have a plan. They keep throwing their hands up saying, this is somebody else's fault. It's October, and the numbers are skyrocketing. It's obvious we have an open border. It's obvious by the thousands, tens of thousands of Haitians that were in the Del Rio Bridge, where 11 babies were born during that period of time, that there is no plan. And so I want to say a great thanks to Mr. Ortiz, who's head of the Border Patrol, for trying to handle a very difficult situation. These are heroes that we have on the border trying to handle what has basically been no guidance, no effort to rein in, and no way to help and support our Border Patrol face these. They sent 2,000 agents down to Del Rio. These are agents that are disrupting drugs that are coming into West Virginia. These are agents that are making sure that the lawful commerce can go between our borders. These are agents that are away from their families, away from their own duty stations to fill in what was characterized as an emergency. And we've got another one coming. We know that. So I would implore the president and the vice president to act. It's important to my state of West Virginia. It's important to the nation. It's important to the people who are trying to get here legally. Where are they in this conversation? They're barely even discussed. So I want to thank you again for pulling us together. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
So I want to thank Senator Cruz for putting this together. I'm from an immigration state. We like immigration, but we like legal immigration. Floridians don't want people to come here illegally. They want people to come here legally. Now, if you just think about the numbers for a second, we're going to have about a little over 2 million people come here illegally this year. Think about that. By the end of this year, 1 out of every 150 people in this country will have come here illegally this year. 1 out of every 150 people will have come here illegally this year. That's staggering. So you look at my state. We have more fentanyl coming in the state. Talk to sheriffs all across my state. But here's something I found fascinating when I was governor of Florida. There was a refugee issue when I was governor. I talked to the Obama administration, Biden administration, and they told me I had no right to any information about any refugee that was coming into my state. No vetting information, no healthcare information, no criminal background, where they were from. They said, as the governor of Florida, I didn't have any right, and law enforcement didn't have any right. That's wrong. If we're going to bring in refugees in this country, our governors, our mayors, all of our law enforcement needs to have all the information so they can take care of their communities.
We'll do a couple of questions.
Senator touched on this a little bit, but most of these migrants are not being medically checked for COVID. Are you concerned about a spike in diseases that have been eradicated in the past?
Well, I think Senator Marshall addressed that at considerable length, and I'll let him elaborate on it momentarily, but it is a very real problem. When I was down in the Rio Grande Valley a couple of weeks ago, the Biden cages that have on a typical day about 4,000 people crammed in on top of each other, the rate of COVID positivity when I was last there was about 24%. And the Biden administration is releasing illegal immigrants who are COVID positive into every community across the country. They're releasing them into South Texas. Just McAllen alone This year, the Biden administration has released over 7,000 illegal immigrants into McAllen, Texas, who were COVID positive. To put that in perspective, the population of McAllen is about 141,000. 5% of the city of McAllen consists today of illegal immigrants with COVID that Joe Biden released this year. It is a crisis. It is dangerous. The Del Rio Bridge, when I was there, they weren't testing anybody. They had no idea who had COVID and who didn't. This Biden administration is willing to impose mandates on our soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines, is willing to impose mandates on federal employees, is willing to illegally try to impose mandates on private employers. But when it comes to illegal immigrants, their radical open border policies trumps any desire to combat COVID, and it is dangerous. Senator Marshall,
Yeah.
Dr. Marshall.
Yeah, just really quickly, of course we're concerned, and my big concern is the variants. We should be at herd immunity by now. 70% of adults vaccinated, half of the people not vaccinated should have natural immunity, but yet this Delta variant had to come from somewhere and continues to cause reinfection. So my big concern is, what are the next new variants going to be coming in across the border in such large volume? So yes, we're very concerned about future spikes.
All right, we'll do one last question. Yes.
Could you point to specific policy priorities you want the Biden administration to enforce that you
Okay.
think they're not enforcing?
Yes, and I will say it was rather striking when the White House press secretary claimed Republicans have no solutions, because we have been talking specific solutions from the very beginning. This was caused by 3 decisions Joe Biden and Kamala Harris made on the very first day in office. Number 1, they immediately halted construction of the border wall. How do you turn this around? Reverse that decision. Resume construction of the border wall. By the way, we're paying people not to build the border wall with taxpayer funds. That's one concrete step. A second concrete step, on day 1, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris reinstituted the failed policy of catch and release. What should they do? Reverse that policy. End catch and release, because it causes this crisis. And the third policy, the most concrete policy, on the first day in office, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ended the incredibly successful Remain in Mexico agreement. What was Remain in Mexico? It was an agreement that President Trump negotiated with the government of Mexico, that the government of Mexico agreed that anyone who crossed illegally into Mexico would remain in Mexico while their U.S. asylum case was proceeding. And Remain in Mexico was incredibly successful. So much so that last year, illegal immigration fell to the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. When the White House says they can't fix this problem, they are not telling you the truth, because the problem was largely fixed last year. And they broke it. They broke it because on day 1, Joe Biden ripped up that international agreement. A federal court has now ruled that ripping up that international agreement was illegal. The Biden administration is under an order from a federal court to return to that agreement, and they are slow walking. I've talked to Border Patrol officials who have said that the Biden DHS is slow walking compliance with that order. They could implement it today, but they're defying a federal judge because, sadly, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have handed control of the agenda on immigration over to the radical open borders extreme left. You know, when I was down in South Texas a couple of weeks ago, I did roundtables with farmers and ranchers, but also with Border Patrol agents, with sheriffs, with law enforcement, with local elected officials. Most of the elected officials in South Texas are Democrats. South Texas has been historically a very Democratic part of the state. Almost to a person, the elected officials I spoke with in South Texas, the Democrats said, you know, if the Democratic Party nationally is the party of open borders, I can't support that. I can't stand with that. And I will note McAllen, which has been a bright blue Democratic bastion for a long time, just elected a Republican mayor. Because the people who are seeing firsthand the tragedies, the little girls and little boys who are being sexually abused by the traffickers, the drugs that are flowing over, the bodies that are left, the people that are left to die in the desert heat, this is unconscionable, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris caused it. The way to fix it is reverse the political decisions they made on January 20th of this year. They could do it and fix it. It is only partisan politics that prevents them from doing so.
Yep. I think that's good.
All right, thank you, guys.